I'm Christina Onnested. The House committee investigating the deadly January 6th Capitol insurrection will hear from former Justice Department officials who faced down a relentless pressure campaign from then-President Donald Trump to help overturn the 2020 election results today. The officials are also expected to testify about how the former Republican president sought to bend his will at the law enforcement agency that has long cherished its independence by attempting to install leaders who were favorable to his plans, which were derailed when Justice Department officials threatened a mass resignation, a near unprecedented move, though a similar incident occurred once before during Watergate. The Senate is expected to vote on a modest gun control bill today that's gained support from some Republicans. Eileen Alfandary has more.
The bill contains more than $250 million over 4 years for mental health support for school children, $150 million for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and $60 million to train primary care physicians on mental and behavioral health issues. The legislation would toughen background checks for the youngest firearms buyers, providing extra time for checking the records of gun buyers under the age of 21 and allowing their juvenile records to be used in those checks. It also requires more sellers to conduct background checks and beefs up penalties on gun traffickers. And it would close the so-called boyfriend loophole, keeping guns out of the hands of abusive dating or romantic partners who have committed domestic violence. I'm Eileen Alfandary for Pacifica Radio.
Uvalde School District's police chief, Pete Arredondo, has been put on leave in the wake of the botched police response to the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead and 17 more wounded. Superintendent Hall Harrell said he put Arredondo on leave. Arredondo faces outrage for his role as commander in charge of the response to the massacre, as officers armed with rifles waited in a school hallway for more than an hour while the gunmen carried out the massacre. European Union meets in Brussels today to consider Ukraine's appeal for membership, which it's expected to receive. European Parliament earlier adopted a resolution in support of Ukraine and Moldova's EU membership, 529 yeas to 45 nays. Meanwhile, Ukraine is running an evacuation train out of Lviv today, where prosecution of Viktor Medvedchuk begins with a preparatory hearing. The Russian ally and Ukrainian oligarch faces up to 15 years in prison for charges including providing Russia with state secrets and abetting a terrorist organization. Ukrainian authorities say Russia's military has captured 2 villages in eastern Ukraine and are vying for control of a key highway in a continued offensive on the front lines of the Donbass region. In the U.S., President Joe Biden has announced a plan to suspend the federal gas tax for 3 months, an effort to tamp down gas prices ahead of the November elections. Christopher Martinez reports.
President Joe Biden says suspending the tax will bring consumers relief. Biden is calling out the oil industry.
I call on the companies to pass this along, every penny of this 18-cent reduction to the consumers. There's no time now for profiteering.
Of course, the president does not have the power to make companies pass on the tax cut, but Biden offered moral persuasion.
To the companies running gas stations and setting those prices at the pump, this is a time of war, global peril, Ukraine. These are not normal times. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you are paying for the product. Do it now.
It faces likely opposition from Republicans and some Democrats in Congress. Even so, the proposal does seem to offer both a policy goal, providing quick relief to consumers, and a political goal, helping Democrats in the November congressional elections. Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
Inflation was a topic at its Senate hearing with Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell testifying before lawmakers more interest rate increases are likely. His plan received blowback from Massachusetts Democrat Elizabeth Warren, who warned of a looming recession.
Inflation is like an illness, and the medicine needs to be tailored to the specific problem. Otherwise, you could make things a lot worse. And right now, the Fed has no control over the main drivers of rising prices. You could actually tip this economy into recession. So I just want to say, you know what's worse than high inflation and low unemployment It's high inflation and a recession with millions of people out of work.
Robert Reich, former labor secretary, wrote on social media that there are far less draconian ways to reduce inflation, like, quote, using antitrust laws against companies that are raising their prices while enjoying near record profits, subjecting them to a windfall profits tax, and requiring all government contractors to keep a lid on prices, unquote. The right to boycott in the U.S. may be in limbo after the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled boycotts are not protected by the First Amendment Wednesday. The ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, says it will challenge the ruling to the Supreme Court, noting it would have adverse impacts on free speech in the U.S. Brian Haas, chief litigator for the ACLU, said in a statement the Eighth Circuit decision steers from precedent and, quote, this nation's long-standing traditions. It ignores the fact that this country was found on a boycott of British goods and that boycotts have been a fundamental part of American political discourse ever since, unquote. Afghanistan's Taliban government has appealed for global support as it marks at least 1,000 dead from a 6.1 magnitude earthquake yesterday. Villagers rushed to bury the dead and dug by hand through the rubble of their homes in search of survivors in the rural eastern part of the country where the quake hit. International aid groups are stepping up to provide aid, including the United Nations. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.